Welcome to Film Talk Weekly Radio. This is your guest host, Castle Cersei, with the Santa Fe International Film Festival. Today, I am really lucky to be here with yet another winner from the Santa Fe International Film Festival. The winner for Best New Mexico Documentary Feature Award. We have the director, Jenna Naranjo Winters, with the film Dream, Touch, Believe. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me and for that introduction. I still cannot believe that our film won. When you said that, it's like I have to pinch myself. It still does not feel real. So thank you. Thanks for
Yeah, congratulations. So you went to the festival, and was that your first time?
It was my first time at the Santa Fe International Film Festival. It's only the third festival I've ever been to. I am not afraid to tell you or the audience that I'm a complete novice. I am a complete newbie. I'm a first-time filmmaker. I'm a long-time journalist, but making a film and producing a piece for television or writing a news article is completely different.
Okay, well, let's just start with that. I mean, give us like the synopsis about the film. We don't want to give it all away because it's screening in Santa Fe right after this, pretty much. We're going to air on Saturday, 11/1, and it airs 11/2 at Sky Cinemas at 2:30. So, but give us like, a hint.
Well, absolutely. I am a proud New Mexican, born and raised. I was born in Santa Clara Pueblo, grew up in Espanola, went to Pewaukee High School, and I had my very first job in Santa Fe. And my dad, you could say his home base for his career has been in Santa Fe. So I have
Oh,
a feeling that some of the listeners might be very familiar with his story, but I made this film about my father, sculptor Michael Naranjo, and he comes from a very artistic family. However, he was drafted to the Vietnam War in the late 60s, was blinded by a grenade. It exploded in his hand. And so he came home with no eyes and the use of just one hand. But he went on to have an absolutely incredible and sometimes unbelievable career as a sculptor. And so, I never, ever in a million years thought that I would become a filmmaker. I always knew that I wanted to be a journalist. Journalists had visited our home, for as long as I can remember, since I was an infant, really. And so I knew that they existed and that they had this incredible responsibility to share stories with their readers or their viewers. But I never thought I'd make a film until I had eventually started working in true crime. My specialty became true crime television. And so for at least a few decades, I told stories, whether it was on America's Most Wanted or another
wow.
show called Snapped. I loved that job for a long time. And then eventually it became very, very depressing, as you can imagine.
Can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought, I want to share something hopeful and uplifting. And how am I going to do that? And then I realized that the story that needed to be told was with me all along. And so that's when the idea first struck, and I'm getting a chill just thinking about it. I need to share this story about my father because I had seen my whole life um, how effective it was at inspiring people of all ages. Whether it was my dad talking to my kindergarten classroom about his life and overcoming challenges, or whether it was um, seeing him talk to a ballroom of veterans and inspiring them to, face the challenges after coming home from various wars. So I knew that this was an effective story and inspiring audiences. Um, Yet I had no clue how to make a film. And so that's kind of where it all started.
Amazing. But to me, like being a journalist, like kind of lends itself to documentary because you're like finding the story, right? Or you can go one route of just collecting a bunch of film or footage and then find the story through editing, right? So it seems it's like a natural progression, to me for you. And clearly you come from, an artistic, you know, legend, really. And so you're creative. I guess tell us how you did it then. So you've never made a film, and like what were your first steps?
Um, I decided to approach it the same way that I would have approached any story. So you're right in that. Yeah, I really had no clue just how hard this was actually going to be. And, it actually took me more than 10 years to finish.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I think had I known how challenging this actually was, I probably wouldn't have started, but I'm lucky I didn't know because I just
Yeah.
went for it. And, I took baby steps along the way. What really happened is I was sitting at my desk. I was working for a popular entertainment network in Hollywood, and it was my job to pitch crime stories. And this was much later in that part of my career. And so I had countless crime stories just living in my head where I knew the sources and they trusted me. And so I could pitch anything. And so, I would pitch 5 crime stories a day. And one day my boss came up to me and said, Jenna, you're really working too hard and you're making everyone look bad. I don't care what you do. Just go work on your own project at your desk. And it's not that I was working that hard. I just had done this for so long. It was very easy. And so I thought, okay, well, I've always wanted to tell this story about my dad. How do I do it? And so I just started researching. I called a few friends back home. In fact, I had called the former governor of Pueblo, George Rivera. He had been a wonderful contact of mine earlier in my career. I had started as a reporter at the Santa Fe New Mexican. That was my very first job. And so I knew, obviously George isn't a filmmaker, but he was a well-connected entity in New Mexico. And so I said, how do I make a film? Who can I call? Who can help me? And he gave me a few ideas, and that's kind of where it started. And so I did a ton of research. Um, I started out, applying for grants, filmmaker labs, but again, I was an unknown entity and I found it very challenging. And so eventually what happened is um, I got a fiscal sponsorship from a group called the Gotham, which is based in New York. They help filmmakers. And so, I started a donation campaign and they collected all of these donations, whether it was like $5, $100. And eventually, I had gathered enough to, start a trailer, build a website. And it's really been a grassroots effort, even to this day. I've had to take extra jobs to help get this across the finish line. And that's okay because once I started, I decided that I wasn't going to stop, regardless of how hard it actually was. And so I think that's also why it took so many years. It was baby steps every single day, the tiniest baby steps. And had I not had this wonderful example of my mother and father who literally chased these impossible dreams, and that's really what this story is about, I may not have had the courage to chase my impossible dream.
Yeah, so the very people that you're inspired by making the film are the people that made you who you are that can make the film. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah.
I also didn't want to give up so I could show my daughter that I finished what I said I was going to do. She's only 8, so I started this before she was born, and there have been so many challenges throughout the decade that I've been creating this, whether it was becoming a mother. I live in California the majority of the time, and so, we had wildfire fires come through our neighborhood. So
Yeah.
living through that and regrouping after all of that, or whether it was COVID or if I'm being really honest with you, at one point just, I think, a year and a half ago, my dad got extremely sick and he was in the hospital for 3 weeks. And I didn't think he was going to survive. And I had not finished my film yet. And I felt like a complete failure
Oh,
because I had worked on this for so many years. And I thought, Jenna, you didn't work fast enough. And now your family, who you are trying to honor, isn't going to get to see the finished product. And I felt horrible. So I rushed, to my dad's side and I took my laptop with me and I showed him the draft that I had completed. And he cried so much and I cried. And
oh,
at that point, I knew that if he survived, I promised myself that I would work tremendously fast. I mean, as fast as I possibly could to ensure that someday he might be able to enjoy um, this portrayal of his life story in a theater. And so I will never be able to express to the festival, to the Santa Fe International Film Festival, my gratitude because that dream didn't just come true. It came true in, what I consider to be my home, my hometown, amongst the people that I love, the place that I love. It was probably the biggest pinch me moment I
oh,
will ever, ever, ever have. And so I just feel forever indebted to this festival with gratitude and love.
oh, I love that. This film won Santa Fe International Film Festival's Best New Mexico Documentary Feature Award at the festival that just ended a couple weeks ago. And what's really cool this year is we have these encore screenings happening at Sky Cinemas in Santa Fe at the rail yard. And on Sunday, November 2nd at 2:30, there's a screening of Dream Touch Believe. And that 2:30 screening actually supports the Santa Fe International Film Festival, that specific screening time. So here's your chance if you didn't get to see. You can't see every film at the festival. There's so many. And I haven't even seen your film yet, but I'm going to. Still trying to catch up on all the films I didn't get to watch. But good problems to have. And everyone in Santa Fe can go see this film pretty much in your, hometown, what you consider like a home to you, right? And your
Oh
dad,
yeah,
your dad considers Santa Fe a home.
it's definitely home. It's where the heart is.
Yeah.
My dad shows his artwork there. Many of his pieces can be seen around town, whether it's in front of the state capitol or
Oh, wow. Okay.
yes, there's a big hoop dancer. I believe it's on the west side of the Capitol.
Oh,
Pieces are there. They're in the Nidra Matucci Gallery off of Paseo de Peralta. And then one of my favorite places to visit is the lobby of the Bataan Memorial Building, which is just off the plaza. I would have to double check what street it's on, but there are at least, I want to say, 15 sculptures in there, and it's a fully touchable art exhibit. So one of the big landmarks in my family's career is that my father obviously creates his sculptures through touch. He is completely blind, and so a big exercise for him has been touching the work of other sculptors. And in fact, in our film, we show him doing just that in a very, very big way.
I saw
Um,
the clip of that. That was amazing.
yeah, he's had the chance to touch some monumental, historical, iconic sculptures, and so some of the best scenes of our film show just that. But he decided that he wanted to make sure that people can enjoy his pieces the exact same way that he creates them. And so anytime he has a show, all of the sculptures are touchable. It doesn't matter
I love
your
that.
age or where you're from, but there's just something about it. You notice things you didn't notice. You connect with art in a different way than maybe you ever had before. And so I think it's a beautiful experience. So those are some of the places in Santa Fe where people can see his work. And so absolutely, New Mexico and Santa Fe is a home base. And I'm glad that you mentioned those additional screenings because both of our screenings sold out. And then
Yes.
my family and I have heard from countless friends and family, we didn't get tickets. When can we see it? And I feel terrible saying, I don't know,
Yeah,
because we're still in the festival circuit. We don't have distribution yet. So there really isn't a place that everyone can see it yet. So to have that extra screening, I feel so grateful just to be able to write back to friends and family and say, hey, you have another chance.
yes, I'm sure it's going to sell out. So,
You
yeah,
never know. I have
yeah,
no expectations. One thing I've learned in this process is just to not have expectations because I feel like it's much more fun to be surprised
sure.
than to just expect something. In fact, we just came back from the Naples International Film Festival in Florida, and I was just happy again to have been selected there. I'm shocked anytime we're selected, not because I don't believe in my film, but just because, it's all very competitive. There are so many great films out there, so many deserving and hardworking filmmakers. So it's always such an honor to be selected at a festival. But while we were there, we won the Audience Award for Best Documentary Feature. And so once again, I was in complete shock.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome. So I just feel like, just setting no expectations has really been the
I
way to
like that attitude. Yeah,
it's
yeah,
been it's been good so far. So I'm just gonna stick with that.
yeah, yeah. Keep going with
Yeah.
it. Uh, so tell me more about your dad and like how he responded to the whole. I mean, tell me anything you want about him. He sounds like the most fascinating person, but also like how he responded to you creating a documentary about him.
Um, well, my parents, it's actually a film. It focuses on my dad, but I did want to include my mom quite a bit in the story as well because she's kind of like that unsung hero or the person in the shadows, or if we want to get a little corny, she's like the wind beneath his
But
wings.
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So she really is, as silly as that sounds, she is the wind beneath all of our wings. And so when I first started filming, I noticed that a lot of people would come up to me and say, well, how did they meet? Or, you know, what's it like that, they do this job together? And I think one thing that people are most shocked to learn is that my dad was blinded before he ever met my mom. So people are shocked to know that my dad's never seen my mom or my sister and I. And so I did want to make sure that I included her part of the story in this. But to answer your question, my dad has set this incredible example of not giving up on your dreams.
Yeah.
He always tell my sister and I, you can do anything you want as long as you put your mind to it. And so I think when I approached them and said, I'd like to make a film about you, because they are creative people and have sought impossible dreams their entire lives and careers, naturally they said, okay. Because the film did take more than 10 years, probably somewhere around year 8, they were probably thinking, okay, what is she doing? Is this ever going to happen? Why did we say yes to this? But they were fully on board. They were wonderful and willing participants. And I think it's really been fun for them now that we're in this next phase and that it's been completed and we can share it with audiences. And I did learn so much about them in this process, more than I ever thought I would.
Yeah, that's such a great opportunity, I think. Like, we don't always get to know our parents as people, even, even if they're not a famous person or, like, and even if they are famous, and you said so many reporters had been to the house and, like, so many people were curious about his story. but I'm sure there was more to learn.
The only reason I'm like good at these
Well, this
timing,
is what you do. Yeah.
the worst job I ever, well, I shouldn't say the worst, but the most grueling job I ever had was working the overnight shift at the ABC affiliate in Washington, D.C. So I would get there at 1 a.m., look at all of the news wires, and then write the news copy for the anchors. And they would get in at 3 a.m. and then they'd start doing the morning show, and I'd get to go home at 9 a.m. And it was really hard and really grueling. But in that time, like we had to write like 20 scripts in like 30 minutes, and then you had to like look at the time, and it was like I almost felt like I was in a video game, like a scary crunch video game. It was horrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that actually led me to my true crime job. I told myself I will take any job I can to get out of this crazy night shift. And it worked for some people, but it wasn't for me. I didn't know if I should eat like cereal or dinner
Oh,
when I got home at 9 a.m. It
yeah.
was so confusing and I didn't want to sleep. But the first job that came my way was a job as a production assistant at America's Most Wanted. And so I just said, great, I'll take it. Get me out of this night shift.
Are you one of the people that like true crime dramas, or did you like it before you worked in it?
I don't even think I knew about it. Well, I can't say that. I loved watching, and this was what a strange kid I was. I loved watching 2020 on Friday nights with
Hmm.
my parents. That was like the
Cool.
big Friday night. So
Yeah.
I think I always loved investigative journalism, but I can't say I loved true crime. But I sure, fell right into the heart of it. And it was a wonderful, exciting job. And I relied on a lot of the things I learned there, believe it or not, when I was making my film.
Makes sense. Were you working that job the whole time you were creating this film?
No, no, I finished the series had been canceled before I started on the film.
Okay.
I always had the idea to do it, and I talked about it with our executive producer many times, and he was one of the best bosses I ever had, but he was also very honest, and I loved that about him because if he said, "Oh, this story's horrible," you felt really badly about yourself and you would go and make it better. But if he said, "Wow, you did a good job," then you knew that you had done a great job. And so finally, he came to me one day and he said, "Jenna, I am sick and tired of you talking about this film that you're going to make. Quit talking about it. I don't want you to tell me any more about it until you start doing it." And so that was, he was definitely someone that encouraged me in a very grumpy but encouraging way.
Uh-huh. Well, sometimes you need that. Like I saw in the trailer your dad said that when he has an idea to start sculpting, he's afraid of it at first
Mhm.
before he starts. And I notice that about myself when I do creative projects. It's like I'm afraid to start or I'm afraid to move to the next phase. And like
Yes.
I'm guessing that could have, when you have that idea, I hear this from a lot of creatives, and then you're like, you have that moment you're afraid to get started.
It's the fear. I think we all have
Yeah.
that fear,
Fear
right?
of failure, fear of success, and like, yeah, sometimes you need someone to say, get on it.
Oh, yeah.
And he wouldn't have said that if he didn't think it was a good idea, it sounds like. So,
Oh, definitely not. No, he inspired me and always gave me a good kick in the butt, so to speak, to just get going.
what did you do after the true crime show? What was your next move?
Um, Well, this was one of the big moves for me. I wanted to stop doing true crime, to be honest, because I became a mom and I realized that it wasn't a healthy job for me. And also it wasn't a safe job for me. One of the last stories I worked on, it wasn't for a show like America's Most Wanted. It was a lot more sensational. And so it was my job to go out into the field and to interview people who were either charged with murder, convicted of murder,
Oh.
Or on the other side of the coin, it was my job, and this part actually bothered me more. I always felt great responsibility in this. It was my job to meet with the families of victims of these horrible crimes. And I always wanted to make sure that I was very sensitive to their needs, to their story, to the memories of their lost loved ones. And so that part was always much more grueling and gut-wrenching. But as far as interviewing convicted killers, or serial killers, or people who had done horrible things, there were times where I didn't always feel safe. A camera crew and I had traveled to Southern California to meet with a former NFL linebacker who had been charged with murder. And at first, I didn't think anything of it, but it was my camera crew who said, "Hey, Jenna, do you think we're safe? We're going to be in this tiny room with a um, person who's accused of murder who also is big enough to have been on the NFL." And I thought, yeah, I guess they're right. This might be a little bit scary. And then, of course, they were exciting times, but there were times where my colleagues and I would travel with SWAT teams or with bounty hunters, and we did find ourselves in some precarious situations, like car chases in the middle of a
Oh my
desert,
God.
or uh, traveling in the middle of the night in swamps in Louisiana looking for people who had been convicted of horrible, horrible crimes. So eventually I decided I needed to get out of that.
Yeah, I'm so glad. I'm scared for you.
It
Like,
was a great job as
uh-huh.
a younger single person without a
Sure.
child. But
Yeah.
coincidentally, the cinematographer who shot our film, his name is Bill Stengel, and he is a Santa Fean. He had done a piece on my dad for the New Mexico True campaign.
Oh,
And when I saw that piece, I knew that the way he shot it was exactly the way I had pictured all of this in my mind's eye. And so I contacted him, and when he agreed to work on this with me, it was so wonderful. I don't think he knew that this was going to take more than 10 years. He also may not have said okay, but to have him on our team was just such an incredible blessing. And so, as it turns out, we worked so well together that I actually work as a production coordinator for Bill in all of his shoots. And he does primarily shoot in New Mexico, sharing the stories of artists, of business owners, of just so many wonderful, wonderful people in the land of enchantment in our great state of New Mexico. So I love that job.
that's gotta just feel be just so much better on your psyche, even subconsciously than having like the murder, you know, true crime content running on backgrounds or
It is, it is so much
yeah,
better.
yeah, it just has to even if you don't realize it, it just has to be better like subconsciously even and better for everyone around you and
Yeah. I
yeah.
think when I first did that job, especially for America's Most Wanted, there definitely was a call to action. And there were plenty of times where the work that we did helped solve cases. It helped
That's great. Yeah.
identify missing children. In fact, the very, very first case I ever worked on at America's Most Wanted was about a young woman whose name was Casey Jo Pipestem, and she had been murdered and left for dead in Oklahoma. Um, and her case led investigators to identify a serial killer. Um, and so, as part of our show, we helped bring closure to several families. And so, I always enjoyed working for that particular show because it did feel like perhaps the work we were doing was assisting law enforcement. One of the stories I worked on helped identify a Jane Doe in Albuquerque. And then another case in New Mexico that we had worked on involved um, the murders that happened on the West Mesa, where there were multiple bodies of women found.
Oh,
And unfortunately, their killer still has not been identified, but just to be able to work on something in my home state
Yes.
always felt good. But yes, collectively over time, I started to have terrible nightmares.
Yeah, I
I
was wondering about that. Yeah, we're so lucky to, Santa Fe is such a, Santa Fe appreciates art so much that, like, not only is it a film, but it's a film about an artist. And I think that is, one reason it won Best New Mexico Documentary Feature, but also your storytelling must be really great in this documentary. And sometimes telling a documentary story can be difficult. It's a lot in the editing, right? Or did you go in with a story?
I kind of knew what the story was, just because I had grown up watching it my entire life and hearing it portrayed in the media over and over, but I wanted to make sure that I shared something different. And so one of the things I did was talk to my dad on the phone for hours and hours and hours, as well as other relatives, just to learn more about this story. And we talked on the phone because for most of the time, I live out of the state of New Mexico. And so, my parents live there. And so I talked to my dad to learn everything from, his childhood to what it was like in the Vietnam War to coming home with a war injury. But one of the most shocking things that I learned while we were speaking on the phone was the idea that he still had dreams to chase. My dad is now 81 years old, and as you'll see in the movie, he's accomplished some incredible and crazy dreams that seem not impossible just to him, but basically to anyone. And
Right.
so, on a whim, toward the end of our conversations, I asked my dad, is there anything else that you'd like to do with your life? Do you have any dreams left? And I was sure that he was going to say, no, I've done everything I want.
Mm-hmm.
But he floored me, and it was emotionally shocking. He told me that I'm reaching the end of my trail, Jenna. I know I don't have that many sunrises left. And so I'd like to see a sculpture called End of the Trail so I know what that looks like. And just to hear your parent talk about their own mortality in such a beautiful but
Mm-hmm.
shocking way, it killed me. I hung up and just cried and cried and thought, how could he say that? But then also the way that he said it was so beautiful. And the idea that he wanted to see the portrayal of the end of the trail in sculpture form was incredible to me. And so there is this beautiful sculpture called End of the Trail, which lives in Oklahoma City. It's a very famous sculpture. It portrays a warrior on top of a horse, and they're both weary because they've reached the end of the trail. And so my dad had hoped to be able to touch this sculpture. And so I don't want to ruin the surprise for anyone. So there is a spoiler alert here, but we were able to capture him doing that. And it was so beautiful and so tremendous. But, outside of the footage that we captured, to me, it was the beauty of the idea that we should all give ourselves permission to chase our dreams until our dying day. And I think that that has stuck with me more than anything. And so, yeah, I learned something new about my dad and about life is that, yeah, it's okay to dream, regardless of how far you are or how far you aren't in your career or your life. Dreams are so important. And I think we forget that as adults sometimes. It's easy to do that as children, but as
Right.
adults, we get swept away in the busyness of life.
Right. No one asks you when you're like middle age what you want to be, really, when you're like a
What's your
kid.
dream? What's your
Yeah.
dream, Cassie?
Yeah. That was a great question you gave him. I think that was in the trailer, was it? Was that the part in the trailer? Yeah.
We do have a trailer that
Yeah.
displays that, so it's not too much of a spoiler.
Right.
Um,
Where can people see the trailer? What's the website?
Sure. The website is dreamtouchbelieve.com. We have a few trailers there. There's more information about my father, about our story, a few links if you want more information, links to our social media pages. You can learn more about our team. We had a very small team. Um, as I mentioned earlier, when I first started, it was just myself and our cinematographer, Bill Stengel, and he had actually started working as the editor. But neither he nor I have ever done a piece this long before. And so eventually we realized that we did need help from an actual editor. And so I called on, I don't want to say a friend, he's a friend now, but at the time I had worked with this person once before at America's Most Wanted, and he had helped me tell this very tragic story. Yet I remembered that he put so much heart and emotion into it. And I thought, if anyone's going to help me with this, I need them to be able to edit with emotion. And I knew that he would be able to do that. And so his name is Steve Coburn, and he agreed to help me, even though, I told him up front, I don't think I can afford your day rate, but this is what I'm doing. And so this really has become a project of heart and soul and love because I feel like anyone who has agreed to work on it is fully invested in the story. And I hope that that shines through when audiences see it on the screen. And I hope that, a lot of people will get to attend the screening tomorrow. And, in the future, it is my ultimate goal to share this story with audiences everywhere. We don't have distribution yet. Again, I'm a small team. I'm learning about that as I go, but
Mhm.
I'm just here to watch it unfold. I have no expectations, but very big hopes.
I love it. And you're still on the festival circuit. Yeah.
Yes, we are. We just came from Naples, Florida. They had a beautiful festival there. Also, another community that loves the arts. And we had an overwhelming response. Again, we won the Audience Award for Best Documentary, which was a huge surprise. And next, we are headed to the Red Nation, the 30th anniversary Red Nation Indigenous International Film Festival. And we will play at the Grove in Los Angeles on Veterans Day, November 11th.
Amazing. Okay,
So,
great.
and I hope we have a long journey ahead. I don't
Yeah,
know.
you're at the beginning of your journey. Like I was thinking I'll ask what you'll do next, but you're just in this journey. I mean, maybe you do have a plan, but do you think you'll make another documentary? Now that you've been through the process?
I definitely, you are completely right in to say that my main focus right now is to see this film go out into the world in the best way possible. It has become like a family member. It's like my
Yeah,
child because it's
yeah.
been with me for so long, and
Uh-huh.
so I want to see it like do well, and I want people to treat it kindly and with respect. But I have so many ideas. I'd love to learn more about scripted television or filmmaking. I have quite a few ideas for documentaries, but I do know how challenging and hard this has been. Yet I do feel like I learned more than I ever could have imagined. And so I would hate to just let all of this learning fall to the wayside. So I know myself, it's
Yeah.
very easy for me to want to sit still, but I can't sit still. I
Yeah.
won't sit still. I feel like I've climbed this mountain and
I think that's it. We have to go. I'm Castle with Film Talk Weekly Radio. We've been here with Jenna Naranjo Winters with Dream Touch Believe about her father, the sculptor, Michael Naranjo. And yeah, I think that's it. But we can't wait to see the film, including me.
yay. Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you. This was
Thank
so fun.
yeah, thank you so much.